What is it about people with autism that you love so much to want to help them as the autism helper?
I think back to like this group of like some of those first few students I had and this group of students, like I said, that I still keep in touch with. And I think about them a lot because some of them for a while maybe had teachers that didn't get them or therapists that just didn't spend the time connecting. And I saw what a difference that made when you do really care and you want to take it's extra work to figure it out. And to figure out the best ways to teach this child to read and to teach this child to communicate what he wants and needs. So I always think about, specific kids too, of like, oh man, like it was fun working with that kid and we really figured it out. And so I think that's why I'm so passionate about it is I want to give that opportunity to this group of kids that might not always get that. And yes, that's all
Mhm.
of education. You might have crappy teachers here and there. And it's not even that, maybe a child had a crappy teacher, but it's a lot of extra work sometimes to figure out what that solution is and what that looks like. And then it keeps changing. And I think that's definitely something that I love about this field. Dr. Stephen Shore said, if you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism. And
Yeah.
I quote that like in every live workshop I do, because as an educator or as a clinician or as a parent, I mean, you are never bored if you teach children with autism. There's always something new. And even if you have the same group of kids for 3 years in a row, man, when they come back after summer break, it's like, oh, guess what? I learned all these new cool behaviors at summer camp and I'm here.
Mhm.
Or, things that worked 2 months ago don't work now. What worked with Johnny isn't going to work with Sarah. So it's always just like taking that detective stance of like looking outside the box. What can I do differently? You can be a 20-year veteran teacher and have one classroom or one child or even just one classroom, like just the dynamic of the kids together that just like knocks you right back to year one where you're like, what am I doing? Like
Mm.
I thought I was better prepared than this. So in that aspect, it keeps you engaged and it keeps you thinking and fresh about different ways. But yeah, I think my why I love this field is always thinking back to students that I've had and the progress that they've made and how awesome it is to see that progress happen.
Can you share a success story with one of your students?
Sure. Let me think about who to talk about. Um, so one of my, like you don't have favorites, but like you have favorites sometimes. So one of my favorite students, really long time ago, came in with pretty little language, maybe one word utterances here and there, a lot of like anxiety based behaviors with like kind of around transitions would like gag to the point of almost throwing up. Like transitions were really hard for him. And we really worked on a lot of like pairing and reinforcement and like making the classroom and me a chocolate chip cookie somewhere he wanted to be. And that really stuck with him. And he loved coming to school. Like days he was sick, like the mom would be like, oh my God, I had to force him to stay home because he like wants to come to school. But he
Mhm.
really loved coming to school. And then once he loved coming to school, we could really, really work on communication. So we went all in on, he had some verbal language. So we're like, we want more. So we just, really kept working specifically on, functional communication, increasing communication opportunities, increasing social skill communication with his peers. And when he graduated, he was such a typical teenager that I just like loved it because he was snarky, like he was snotty. He would tell me, shut up. But I was like, you're 14. Like, yeah, like there should be a
Yeah.
negative consequence for that. But like, I kind of love that you say shut up. Like 3 years ago, you could barely talk. And,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
I like jokingly tell his story a lot that like when the fire alarm would go off, he would always go, ah, shit. And like, it was like always like, people are like, don't say that. But I'm like, that's what I'm thinking too. But I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that he went from like limited language 3 years ago to like having in like the appropriate tone, the appropriate time would
Yeah,
like say that. Um,
yeah.
so I kind of loved how his personality developed and that he was just kind of this like typical 14-year-old boy, and had all these great communication skills that enabled him to like really make friends. And that was fun to watch that last year, is like him really develop relationships on his own with peers.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really cool how as a teacher, you can see the kids grow up year after year, and you really see the changes in the skills that they acquire. So I can just imagine how rewarding that must be.
And all those little baby steps, they really add up. I encourage teachers to spend the time like celebrating the baby steps, cuz that's what you see in, on the day to day, like, oh man, they identified the color orange. We've been working on orange for 2 months. Like, live in that moment. Like, be really excited they identified orange. If you've been working on orange for a while, like you're treating your staff to coffee the next day. Like, call mom and dad and be like, guess what, mom and dad, he said orange. Because no one else is going to really get that except your team and that kid's parents. Like, you might go home and tell your spouse or your roommate, like, guess what, Johnny said orange. And they're like, cool. And you're like, no, 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 this is a big deal.
Yeah, like if
And
you
I
knew
think
him.
yeah. And too often we're like on to the next. We're like, oh, now I got to teach blue. Like, oh my God. So I
Mhm,
think it's like letting yourself, celebrate those little victories, and be good about looking back to like, where was he a year ago? Where was he 2 years ago? To see, then you really see how all those baby steps come together.
mhm. You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.